For over 4 decades, one man has ruled Cameroon, Paul Biya, the invisible monarch of Central Africa. His presence defines the nation's political life, yet his absence often defines its mystery. Since 1982, Biya has been the face, the shadow, and the system of power in Cameroon. In October 2025, he was declared winner once again, re-elected for an 8th term in an election marred by accusations of massive fraud, intimidation, and deadly protests. While the world watched in disbelief, Biya simply carried on, unshaken and silent, as he has always done. The question many now ask is simple but haunting. What has kept Paul Biya in power for so long? Is it luck? Is it loyalty? Or is it something far more complex? Layers of manipulation, control, and political genius built over decades. In this episode, we uncover the hidden mechanisms behind Biya's extraordinary hold on power. We'll explore the centralized nature of his rule, the controlled elections that sustain it, the repression that enforces it, and the international complicity that protects it. This is not just the story of one man, it's the anatomy of a regime that has mastered the art of survival in the heart of Africa. The foundation of power. To understand Paul Biya's longevity, we must begin at the start of his rule. In November 1982, Biya, then Prime Minister, ascended to the presidency following the unexpected resignation of Amadou Ahidjo, Cameroon's founding leader. At first, Biya was hailed as a modernizer, a soft-spoken intellectual promising administrative reform, decentralization, and political openness. His early speeches projected calm confidence. Many believed a new democratic dawn was on the horizon. But beneath that calm surface, Biya was quietly consolidating control. Within 2 years, the so-called Biya-Ahidjo crisis erupted, as his predecessor attempted to influence policy from behind the scenes. Biya responded ruthlessly, purging Ahidjo loyalists, restructuring power around himself, and emerging as the unchallenged ruler. That episode shaped his governing philosophy for the next 4 decades: never share power, never show weakness. Over time, Cameroon's presidency transformed from an institution into a fortress built around one man. Ministers, generals, and judges owed their positions, and their survival, to Biya's personal discretion. Yet, Biya's rule has always carried a strange paradox. For years, he has ruled from a distance, often spending long periods abroad, especially in Switzerland. But his physical absence never weakened his control. Instead, it created an aura of mystery, a remote control presidency that made him seem untouchable, almost mythical. To his supporters, this distance projects calm authority. To his critics, it reflects indifference. But in either case, it has worked. Biya learned early that in Cameroon, silence could be more powerful than speech, and invisibility could be the ultimate form of control. Consolidation of power. At the core of Biya's regime lies a single principle: control everything, trust no one. From the executive to the judiciary, from the civil service to the military, every institution ultimately answers to the presidency. Biya personally appoints, and can dismiss, governors, judges, generals, ambassadors, and directors. This extensive power of appointment has turned the state into a web of personal loyalty. Every promotion depends on his favor. Every career, every ambition, passes through his hands. In practice, this system ensures that no single institution can challenge him. The military is loyal because its leadership changes constantly. The judiciary is silent because its survival depends on political obedience. The bureaucracy functions as a tool of reward and punishment, not accountability. Biya's leadership style thrives on a divide-and-rule approach. He frequently reshuffles key officials, transferring allies before they grow too powerful, promoting rivals only to demote them later. This deliberate instability prevents the rise of any strong successor, a strategy that keeps potential challengers too busy watching their own backs to unite against him. Another pillar of his rule is ethnic patronage. Biya has strategically filled senior positions in the military, police, and government with loyalists, particularly from his southern Beti ethnic group. This network of insiders forms an invisible shield around the presidency, ensuring unwavering loyalty even in times of national crisis. Over time, this blend of fear and favor has made Paul Biya not just president, but the very foundation of Cameroon's political order. Every faction, every interest group, ultimately traces its survival back to him. In such a system, opposing Biya is not just political suicide, it's institutional collapse. This is why, even after 42 years, the ruling party, the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, remains completely dependent on the man at its helm. The message is clear: Without Biya, there is no system. Without the system, there is no Cameroon as we know it. Control of elections. Biya's genius has not been in abolishing democracy, but in hollowing it out. Under international pressure, Cameroon officially adopted a multi-party system in 1990. Opposition parties were legalized, and the illusion of competition was born. But the core of power never shifted. The presidency and ruling party retained control of Elechem, the body responsible for organizing elections. This means the referee, the rulebook, and the results all remain under Biya's influence. Over the years, international and local observers have documented irregularities ranging from ballot stuffing to voter intimidation and opaque result tabulations. Yet, each election ends with the same outcome, a sweeping victory for Biya and his party. In 2018, Biya claimed victory with more than 70% of the vote. In 2025, history repeated itself. Despite widespread anger, reports of fraud, and deadly clashes, Biya was again declared the winner, a man in his 90s extending his reign without challenge. The 2008 constitutional amendment was perhaps the defining moment. When Parliament, dominated by the ruling party, removed presidential term limits, the last legal obstacle to Biya's indefinite rule disappeared. From that point, elections became less about choice and more about ceremony, a ritual of legitimacy designed to assure the world that Cameroon remains democratic. But behind the ballots lies fear. Public servants are often pressured to vote for the ruling party. The media is tightly controlled. Opposition voices are either divided, co-opted, or crushed under allegations of terrorism or sedition. Cameroon's elections have thus evolved into political theatre, predictable, well-orchestrated, and ultimately meaningless in determining power. Biya does not compete to win. He competes to remind the nation that he cannot lose. Repression and force. At the heart of Paul Biya's endurance lies a ruthless instrument of control, the use of force. Over the years, Biya has built and maintained one of Central Africa's most loyal and feared military apparatuses. At its core stands the Rapid Intervention Battalion, known as the BIR, an elite commando force that operates parallel to the regular army. The BIR answers directly to the presidency, not the Ministry of Defense. It is heavily funded, well-trained, and strategically placed under commanders personally loyal to Biya. Officially, the BIR was created to fight terrorism and cross-border threats. In practice, it functions as the regime shield, protecting Biya's rule and suppressing internal dissent. Human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have documented widespread abuses committed by the BIR, arbitrary detentions, torture, and extrajudicial killings, particularly in the Anglophone regions and against political dissidents. Whenever protests erupt, whether from opposition parties, students, or ordinary citizens, the government's response is swift and uncompromising. Demonstrations are banned or dispersed with force. Opposition leaders are detained on vague charges of incitement or terrorism. Journalists who investigate corruption or criticize the president are arrested, silenced, or driven into exile. This culture of repression is reinforced by a judiciary that functions as an extension of the executive. Under Biya, the courts rarely act as independent arbiters of justice. Instead, they are deployed as tools of political management, prosecuting critics under the guise of anti-corruption drives or national security concerns. High-profile opposition leaders such as Maurice Kamto and numerous journalists have been detained for merely questioning electoral results or exposing abuse. Each arrest sends a message. In Biya's Cameroon, dissent is not opposition, it is defiance, and defiance will be punished. This climate of fear ensures stability not through consensus, but through silence. Other supporting factors. But Paul Biya's survival cannot be explained by domestic control alone. Behind his endurance stands an intricate network of international and geopolitical support, especially from powerful Western allies. France, Cameroon's former colonial ruler, remains Biya's most consistent backer. Paris views Yaoundé as a cornerstone of its strategic influence in Central Africa. French companies dominate Cameroon's oil, banking, and infrastructure sectors. In return, France provides quiet diplomatic protection, often blocking or softening international criticism of Biya's human rights record. The United States has also maintained strong security ties with Cameroon, particularly through counter-terrorism operations against Boko Haram in the far north. This partnership, while strategic, has provided Biya with valuable legitimacy, portraying his government as a critical ally in the fight against extremism. Such alliances create a shield of impunity. As long as Biya maintains regional stability and cooperates on security matters, global outrage over his internal repression remains largely symbolic. It is a delicate exchange, stability in return for silence. Domestically, Biya has also benefited from the ongoing Anglophone conflict, a separatist crisis that began in 2016. The government has used the war as both a distraction and a justification. By framing dissent in the English-speaking regions as a national security threat, Biya has expanded military control and diverted public attention from governance failures, corruption, and economic stagnation. Meanwhile, speculation about succession has intensified. Though now in his 90s, Biya has never publicly indicated plans to step down. Yet, growing attention has turned toward his son, Franck Biya. Seen frequently beside his father in official events, Franck has become a central figure in what many analysts call a silent dynastic transition. If true, it suggests the regime's ultimate ambition to transform Biya's personal rule into a political dynasty. But even within the ruling elite, such a move could ignite fierce internal competition once the patriarch leaves the stage. The secret to 42 years in power. After 4 decades in power, Paul Biya's political formula has evolved into a self-sustaining machine. At its core are 4 pillars: control of the military, manipulation of elections, suppression of dissent, and international complicity. Each reinforces the other, creating a cycle of dependence that has proven nearly impossible to break. By ensuring the loyalty of the military through the BIR, Biya neutralizes any threat from within the barracks. By managing elections through institutions he controls, he maintains a facade of democracy that satisfies foreign observers. By silencing dissent through force and legal persecution, he prevents any alternative power base from emerging. And by maintaining strategic partnerships with Western nations, he shields himself from external pressure or sanctions. What makes Biya's rule particularly unique is the illusion of distance. He governs rarely through public appearances or speeches. Instead, his mystique lies in absence, a quiet, deliberate invisibility that reinforces his image as untouchable, omnipresent, and eternal. His absence is not weakness. It is strategy. It transforms him into an idea rather than a politician, an untouchable symbol around which the state, the party, and the army revolve. Over time, the system no longer protects Biya merely out of loyalty, it does so out of self-preservation. If he falls, the entire structure could collapse with him. That is the ultimate secret behind 42 years in power, a regime so deeply entrenched that it has become inseparable from the nation itself. Political implications and the future. But what does Biya's continued rule mean for Cameroon's future and for Africa as a whole? For Cameroon's younger generation, many of whom have never known another president, it represents both frustration and fatigue. An entire generation has grown up under one ruler, in a country where political change feels impossible and leadership has become a matter of inheritance rather than merit. The danger lies not only in Biya's longevity, but in what comes after. When a system revolves entirely around one man, succession becomes a moment of potential chaos. Regionally, Biya's rule serves as both a model and a warning. It demonstrates how authoritarianism can survive within the shell of democracy, through constitutions rewritten, elections controlled, and fear institutionalized. It also shows the price of silence, how apathy, fear, and dependency can paralyze a nation's potential for renewal. Cameroon today stands at a crossroads, between continuity and collapse, between control and change. Paul Biya's 42-year reign is built on absolute control, strategic manipulation, repression, and external alliances. It is a story of endurance, but also of fear. He has mastered not just the art of leadership, but the machinery of survival. The question that remains is one for every Cameroonian, and for the continent as a whole. Has Paul Biya truly mastered leadership, or has he simply perfected the architecture of fear? We leave that for you to decide. This is Politique Africa, where we uncover the power, politics, and people shaping Africa's destiny. Subscribe for more deep, analytical stories from across the continent.